Greeting everybody and welcome back to another episode of our Localization Fireside channel. My name is Robin Ayub. I'm the founder of the channel, and for our relatively young channel has given me the opportunity and given the audience the opportunity to talk, listen, and learn from great thought leaders in our industry, professionals, business leaders, to tell their intriguing stories, and be it on the localization side or general business stories, and discuss trends, technology, process, and also discuss some challenges they face during their personal lives and in building their business careers, etc., and the innovations that we encounter in our business lives and in our personal lives that impact us positively or negatively. So if you have not done so already, I really invite you to subscribe to the channel, connect with us, interact with our content, and join our various channels. We exist on all of your favorite audio podcast and YouTube channels, so feel free to join us, comment, share, like our content. Today, I am honored to have with me my guest, friend, and colleagues worked together before, Kristin Gutierrez. Kristin, welcome to the channel. Kristin is a recognized expert in sales and leadership strategy, as a best-selling author, and she wrote the book on Be a Better. And I recently downloaded the book and I started browsing through it since last night. I read a couple of chapters. It's an excellent book from what I've read so far. Congratulations on the book. Congratulations on being named the best-selling author, which is absolute honor, and also internationally recognized individual in terms of thought leaders. You've received many awards in that category. You've been working with Fortune 500 companies for many years. Kristin, welcome to the channel. Welcome to the episode. Happy to have you with me, and I can't wait to dive into the conversation together. Good to see you, by the way, after so many years.
Right. Robin, thank you so much for having me. It really is an honor to be here. I'm so thrilled. Robin and I worked together at Lionbridge. I don't know. I should have looked it up, like 2012-ish, I think maybe, for a couple years. So it's really incredible to have seen your journey evolve. And I'm just, thank you so much for like all of the accolades that you provided me in the introduction, because it's really been an exciting 3 months, but really the last 20 years, I've learned so much. So I can't wait to share.
So the way, we say on this channel, everybody's got a story, and every one of them has an intriguing story. For me, getting into an industry, being on a plane ride for 2 hours, ended up in an industry I didn't know existed. And so, I've said this story many times on this channel. So for you, what is your story? How did you get in the localization industry? And you have a very interesting one. I can't wait to hear. You have a very interesting story in terms of getting into the industry and then achieving something to go on your own, to do something really excellent and great after what you've learned. I'd love to get the in story and the exit story, I guess, if there's such thing.
Yes, because there are now two pivotal stories to my career thus far. The first one is I graduated college in 2004, and I worked two interestingly dead-end jobs selling yellow page advertising that might not even exist anymore, and also working retail, where I had a boss that was just a massive micromanager to somebody who at the Saks Fifth Avenue, Michigan Avenue, Chicago flagship store was opening the most number of credit cards store-wide. Months and months in a row, I was being micromanaged about. So I needed a new job. I needed a real job. I needed something, right? I had just graduated. I'm like, what is happening? And I I did everything you were coached not to do back then, which is plastered my resume everywhere. And so grateful for Lori in HR and Elise, my first boss at then SDL, now known as RWS, who brought me in as an experimental inside sales rep. And that's kind of my in, because obviously, right, we all kind of come in. Some of us are just thrown in, right? And so that's cool that you and I have similar stories where we didn't go get degrees and all the other amazing ways that people enter this industry. So yeah, I was 2005, SDL's first inside sales, now kind of called business development rep, lead generator. I was the first for that. And it just so happened I was really good at it. And so in 3.5, like in the span of 3.5 years, like 2.5 years in, I was promoted to manager of global inside sales. And I was flying to the headquarters in the UK multiple times a year, training my sales team who, I'm female, I'm young. I just told you I graduated college not too long before that. I was managing these older, mature men, right? And there wasn't a handbook that was given to me as to how to be a manager of inside sales because the role never existed. And so I had to, that's kind of what the premise of the book, right? Is like I had to figure out my own way. And I didn't want to have to be like leading the charge in that regard. But I figured out that if I put processes in place, if I was compassionate, if I was human, if I learned how to manage my manager and all these other concepts we can talk about later, is that then I was both successful in my role and had a team culture that was really thriving, which meant they did better and then I did better. And so it was very self-reciprocating. So that's kind of how I got into the industry and a little bit of like what it was like the first few years.
So, okay, so now that you're in the industry and, 2004, 2005, and what year did you, you mentioned in one of the comments that I've seen online that you were let go from that last job because of changes in the organization, not because you've done anything wrong. So what year was that?
Well, that was April 17th, 2023. So depending on when people are watching this episode, it's basically August, end of July, 2023 right now. So 4 months ago, I was let go. Yeah. And
so have you done any thinking while you were still in the industry as to, people ask this, questions around, I've seen some of your posts, which it's, you speak in everybody's mind, I guess, in this case. So, when people have this question in their mind, they're contemplating the answer to it. And the question is, I must have something bigger out there to do. There's something bigger out there waiting for me, but we don't know what that is. And you talk about clarity, you talk about, trying to figure out what you want, where do you want to go? And you seem to have crystallized all this. And it cannot be crystallized over the past 3 months. You must have figured it out before, if I was, I don't want to keep saying it, but to be let go of your job. Is that true? Or is there a process that you went through? How did you get to that, where you are now, from you were in the industry to where you are? Is it like a span of 3 months? I can't believe that.
That's amazing. Well, it happened in 2022. So it happened a year ago. I was trying, like many vendor side PMs and sales reps and operational directors, I was trying to make my way to the client side. I had worked for a year under Anna Schlegel and Bridget O'Brien, Edith Bendermacher, and the whole team at NetApp. I had taken a pivot from my W-2 job selling translation services to work inside their globalization team, leading communications. And it was by design meant to be temporary. And I had just had my first baby and I realized I really needed like the full salary and all the things, right? And they didn't have a role for me. And so I came back, transitioned back. Actually, then I came to ULG. So I was really happy, right? But ever since then, I was like, wow, I am really, and listen, I loved being a vendor and I loved being a salesperson, but like, how do I leverage all of this experience that I learned in a very short amount of time at NetApp? How do I get back onto the client side? And so just being involved in women in localization, right? I had made a lot of friends, people in high places, and I started looking around. And so true story goes, in 2022, I'm not going to say specifics, but I was interviewing at I'll just say like Meta. I really was. Like I was interviewing at a division of Meta, and it was a 4-month long, grueling, just because of all the prep. If you've ever interviewed at a tech company like that, oh my gosh. There's like blog posts and whole websites dedicated to like how to ace those interviews. So it took 4 months, and ultimately I was second to last candidate, but I didn't get the job. And I was devastated because I was convinced that if I could get into Meta, I could become Chris Cox. And he was then the COO. Now he's like the I'm chief product officer, right? I knew, innately, I was like, I can do this, right? So that opportunity was taken away from me by not getting the job. And I was like, what do I do now? And so it was kind of like, I'm chasing this idea that I want to be like these incredible leaders on the client side in our industry, right? When I realized that I should lean in to, this is where the clarity and the purpose came from. I should lean into the purpose, my expertise, the sales, the leadership. And I sought out a mentor who could coach me on finding my purpose and gaining clarity on it in order to monetize and feel more fulfilled than I ever have. I'm so grateful to the universe that I was let go April 17th because, it wasn't personal. And ultimately, even if it was, like, they pushed me off a ledge so I didn't have to jump. And it's crazy because I also was not prepared. And there's a whole lot of backstory there, but I was not financially prepared to not have a job. And I just leaned all the way in. So in October of last year, I bought mentorship and I spent a lot of money learning how, from people who had been there before me, how to identify my purpose, how to get really crystal clear on it. And then how to tunnel vision focus on one thing to monetize. And that started to look like consulting, language services providers on sales leaderships, and executive strategy, right? And now it has evolved in a very short amount of time. But that's kind of the backstory is I was chasing one thing when I realized I should lean in to this thing. And then I paid for a lot of mentorship to help get me to where I am.
Absolutely. And you bring up a very good point is that when we are in a position where we are right now, especially on the sales and business development side, we're not in an operational mode or a job where you only think in one single instance. If you're a project manager or you're an engineer or whatever you are, if you are in a business, you're exposed to many companies, many possibilities, many conversations. So when you decide to make a step like this, I'm assuming the ideas in your mind is like a ping pong tables. I mean, there's just everywhere, they're bouncing everywhere. And, I've struggled with this. And I'm talking to a few people right now that they went through this. And I've got a couple more episodes on the same topic where people were telling me I had to get, a clear definition of who am I, how do I package myself as an expertise. I've got a lot to offer. I've learned a lot over the years. Somebody must be able to make sense of it and apply it in their business. But how do I bring it to those individuals in their businesses? How do I get paid for it? How much? How do I market it? Who is my customer? Who are my customers? Where do I target? Top, bottom, middle of the business industry, etc. What industries do I go after? Those are big questions, and you cannot be you cannot be one solution to everybody. You have to focus. You gotta get it right, and you seem to have done that. Congratulations, that's great.
Thank you. But you hit on all of the points, right? Which is you have to get clear. You have to identify, just like in sales for LSP world, you have to identify your niche market, or in that case, sometimes it's assigned to you. Hey, Kristin, you're calling on the software vertical in 6 states. Or when I met you, it was I had carved out the market research space for Lionbridge, right? So what is your niche? And then who is your avatar within the niche? And then going. And then, yeah, you're right. As an entrepreneur, it's so exciting because you really you need to be clear and you need to be focused, because otherwise they'll chase your tail all day long. And you're oh, I should do this. I should do this. I should do this. And one thing I don't do is focus on my branding or my sell pages or anything that's not making me money right now. That stuff is very important and it will come, right? But I'm focusing on monetization because that's what I need to do to keep the roof over my family's head.
So, which brings us to another question, which everybody is, gets really anxious and develops sometimes some anxieties about it. And I know a lot of people that were employee and that they made the jump to become an entrepreneur. Is that they're leaving some sort of like the comfort zone, if you will, the regular paycheck, the job that protected them or gave them the life that they had for the past however many years. And they're moving to the unpredictability of being an entrepreneur. There's a pros and cons to everything in this life, right? So you get the freedom, you get to make your own decision as an entrepreneur. You get to make your, chart your own territory, if you will, and your road, how you want to drive your company or your business, because you become the company. It's you who now, Kristin.com is the company. I'm just comparing it to a .com company, but it could be anything really. And then to take this and from what you were as an employee to where you are right now, I have two questions. One is that bridging, you must have had some gap where you were not making money and you have a family, how did you deal with that? And the second one is, are you happier now? Which is a very, very important question that everybody asks. Given to what you know right now, would you have done this sooner? Would you have waited till now? I mean, everything comes with pros and cons, as I mentioned earlier.
I'll answer the second question first. I thank the universe every single day. I have never been happier or more fulfilled. It's truly a blessing. It is a ginormous blessing in disguise. I get the chills. I'm so excited. I'm showing up here. I told you before we started recording, I'm sick actually right now, but just like talking to you and talking to my client this morning. And actually I block Fridays off by kind of a rule. I make obviously exceptions, and I block 8 to 9 off, and I call it mental health in my calendar. I've started walking. I've started doing so many things that in a previous W-2 role, you felt compelled to be always on. Is your team's notification green? Has it been like whatever, yellow for too long? Does it look like you're away? Like, does your boss know? Do they care? Like, it's so stressful, right? So now I've like taken all of that stress out. And so thank you for asking. I've never been happier. To address the first question, okay, hopefully this inspires us all, right? As humans, we seek comfort. We seek comfort in when the thing that happened for me on April 17th, when at 10 a.m., when my CEO came on with HR and said, Kristin, unfortunately, we moving in another direction and we have to end this relationship. We seek comfort. So most people in those times, or not what I did, but a lot of people, comfort you can seek from watching a show, from taking a nap, from working out, from binge eating, binge watching, wrapping up in a blanket. I don't know. You can seek comfort a lot of ways. I sought comfort in action. And so honestly, I have not gone a day without pay. I landed my first client at 2 p.m. So I got fired at 10 a.m. I landed my first client at 2 p.m. I never stopped moving. And taking the initiative is actually something that I'm super passionate about, keynote speaking on, and empowering audiences to really understand like how to break down the act of action, like taking action and putting the steps forward, so that when things like this happen that are very suffocating, right? And like we can talk about the financial distress that potentially I was facing with having purchased my grandparents' house and all of this money we poured into renovation that we didn't have, that I was planning to cash out refinance with my W-2. And when they fired me, the biggest impact was they took away my ability to cash out refi, plain and simple, right? And so what was I going to do to keep that home and to keep the roof over my head? So I sought comfort in action. And it's been so like transformational that having been on the phone and emails and LinkedIn and just doing the thing that I knew how to do as a salesperson, but even if you don't come from a sales background, just asking for help, asking for suggestions, hearing people out, and not festering in resentment, right? Because nobody wants to hear the story of like, woe is me, especially right now. I mean, everyone is being let go for better or for worse, right? Like it's really tragic.
It's going through big transformation right now. Economy is going through transformations. I mean, you talk to people who are working in the resource-based industry, and those industries are just not going to make it, I guess, for the next decade or two. and people are trying to either retire, exit, or try to transform their lives and try to figure out how to do other things in their lives than just work in the resource-based industry. So that's great. I mean, where you are right now, how you and I agree with you 100%. Inaction is the enemy. If you don't do anything, that's time wasted, life wasted, etc. So you got to do something. And and I'm at an age right now where people start asking me like, when are you retire? I'm looking at them, I'm thinking, well, are you crazy? I'll never retire. I'm one of those guys. Probably I'll work till I drop. But it's driven by the excitement, the adrenaline that comes from, and I'm assuming you share the same view, that comes from that conversation that every day that I have with other people that keeps my mind like wants more. I want to hear more. I want to talk to more people, because that drives me forward, because I'm either, enabling a solution or enabling some sort of a conversation that helps somebody else with that conversation. And it's helping me too, because it's a two-way conversation. Like we all went through COVID. Who wants to be, sitting in a bubble, not talking to anybody and just exchanging IMs all day? I mean, that's okay. So you do that for a few months if you're stuck on an island, but at the end of the day, we're human. We're built to connect with others. Am I correct?
Oh my goodness. I just had lunch with an industry leader in Santa Barbara like 2 weeks ago, and it was such a simple act of sharing a meal that brought me so much joy. And to your point, exactly, right? And listen, for those who may not know, Robin, the king of networking and personable connections, I will, and you know exactly what I'm going to say. I will never forget the conference we went to a short time after I started reporting into you. And I was like, whoa, I thought I was a good networker. Mm-mm.
Oh my God, thank you. I remember that one. And I remember, I can't remember the city we were in, but I do remember the conversations we've had in that conference because it's many years ago now. And yes, you're right. And, I don't talk about these types of things on my channel a lot often. Maybe I should. One of the things is I pride myself on is building a network and talking to people and getting to know them on a personal level. And so as everybody else should do that. They're not just a transaction, they're a human being. And I've said this before, and I continue saying it, even after people retire, who became in contact with, they're no longer in any industry. As a salesperson, there is no reason for me to be in touch with anybody. That they retire or they exit the industry for some, or any, they exit business for some reason, one or another. I'm still in touch with those individuals. I'm still, getting to, do lunches with them, go out there, have fun with them. In some cases, I've got one individual who I train on being a photographer. Everybody knows that I'm a hobby photographer. I train on being a photographer while he was my customer. I continue sharing tips with him and going out on field trips after they retire. So it's one of those things that, it doesn't, I keep telling people, people are people at the end of the day. Human are human. They're not going to buy from robots. Maybe you go on Amazon and buy from whatever, but at the end of the day, if you're doing something serious, a serious transaction with somebody, I'm not talking about buying small item on Amazon. If you're talking about an item that, you agree with that too, because we've worked together so many years, is that people buy from people at the end of the day, and people want to buy from people who trust. And if they don't trust, you can't earn trust by just walking to somebody, say, hey, trust me. It develops over time. And this is very, very important at the end of the day.
Well, my saying for years was people buy from people they know, like, and trust. So now, as of this moment, I'm going to credit you, obviously, for having given me that concept. And it was Montreal. We were in Montreal. I do remember. Right. Or at least for one of them, we were in Montreal. But yeah, people buy from people we know, like, and trust. And so your job, whether you're in sales or operations or you're an entrepreneur, is to bridge the gap between I don't know you and I don't trust you. And how do you get there? And, obviously the philosophy goes is to be human, right? Is to your point, it's just be 100%.
Human. And, one of the things is everybody, like I'm talking about pre-COVID, a lot of people attended conferences. They met many people. They probably forgot who they met last year, and they go to the next conference and they probably, they need to be reintroduced. Also God blessed me with a very good memory. I don't take notes, but I do remember. And I remember one time similar conference. I don't know if that was the same conference. I had somebody with me from one of our staff was with me, and we had a little booth, and people were coming into the booth. And I remember, naming people by names, telling them because they told me those stories like a year ago, and they're telling me like about their families, about their kids, and I'm reciting those stories back to them. And the individual was with me and says, "Do you remember all this?" And yep, I do. I do remember them, because it's important to remember them. It is important to you, you remember it. If it's not important, you'll forget it.
Yeah, really impressive.
So speaking of that, so tell me a little bit about what you're doing right now. If you can tell us a little bit about your services, who is your audience. Maybe this channel and this conversation here will help you in the future, and that's the aim of this. What do you like? Who do you like to be the next customer for you?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Robin. So right now there's like two avenues, right? So my niche is our industry, and I have onboarded a zoo. I have worked with a zoo. I have a current client that's a cannabis client. It's a very young industry from a professional sales perspective. So they have a lot of need in that industry, but my niche, my true niche is localization services providers, coaching on sales strategy, sales leadership, and then executive engagement or alignment. And every client relationship looks a little different, as you could imagine, because as you're selling translation services to all these big clients, right? Are you approaching them with MT or with LQA services or translation or transcreation and everything in between, right? So I let my clients tell me what they need, and then I let them know if I can serve them and what that might look like, right? So for sure, I work in a retainer model with LSPs. Typically, the CEO is my point of contact. And then depending on how the relationship is set up, we're doing a few things with various members of their team. So that's super exciting. Within that, I do a lot of workshops. Sometimes the workshops are part of the engagement, and sometimes like the zoo or other clients have brought me in just to do a workshop. And those workshops can look like passion project workshops or just like time management. It really depends on what the client needs. This, as I've evolved in a very short amount of time with like leaning into my purpose and learning how to monetize, right? And go from an unfulfilled state in my current role. You mentioned some of my social media posts, right? So like truly, I loved my job. Like anybody who talked to me would know that I loved my last job and I've loved working in the industry. So it's nothing against that. If you ask Allison McDougall, who managed me forever, she'll know that I also always chased the shiny object. I was a Beachbody coach. I was a real estate agent. I got my yoga teacher training certificate when I was pregnant. I was always looking for that something else, right? And after having the second kid, I was like, oh no, like single sourcing, like multitasking is gone. Like now it's like mono sourcing. So like the more laser focused I got on one thing, the better I actually was at my job. I got promoted at my last job when I was 9 months pregnant, and I got promoted again almost like 9 months after I came back from maternity leave. So it really was a Cinderella story. But in learning like all of these various strategies through my career, and recently since being my own entrepreneur, I realized I also have the ability to coach other ambitious professionals or entrepreneurs who are also unfulfilled in their current roles, right? And realizing their real potential and their brilliance. So what I can do is I can provide them with necessary tools and strategies to either transition from their corporate job to like a coach or a consultant and get paid what they're worth, or to really help them climb the ladder within their roles or to get, kind of if they're looking to stay into corporate. So helping them like realize their ambition and making a substantial impact. But then from that, they get the financial and personal fulfillment. And that's something that I'm super excited to really branch into, right?
You bring up a very good point here. Our industry is going through a ton of transformation, and there's a lot of expertise in the industry. As the industry, I call it reskilling, retooling based on the new technology that they're coming in. There's a lot of skills such as yours. They're no longer industry, so they're outside of the industry now. And in your case, you're let go from your job, but in other cases, people are just retired. They reached that retirement age and they're moving on. But there's a lot of expertise, knowledge left with those individuals that we can all learn from. Similar to yourself, for instance, that knowledge, that expertise that you bring back to the industry that we need to take advantage of. So to all of our viewers, and I think based on the CSA research, we have approximately 19,000 companies in the industry. If you need any coaching, if you need any help in revenue, which everybody tells me that the biggest problem in our industry is revenue generation. If you have revenue generation problem, if you're suffering from, where is my next customers coming from? I highly encourage you to get in touch with Kristin and get her to help you out, get her to open your eyes on a new possibilities, and maybe not necessarily get you into a new customer, but it teaches you how. Teaching somebody to fish is better than to give them a fish. So in my opinion, and I've known Kristin for a while, this is the best thing a small to medium-sized enterprise that can have in their kit bag, in their tools, to have a consultant like Kristin on their side doing the things that you probably can't do internally or don't have the know-how to do it internally. Get in touch with somebody that knows how to do this. So Kristin, from that aspect, and taking it to the next level, as you continue to evolve here, and we're all a creature of learning, and you've evidently put this together in a very astute way. We learn, every new phase teaches us something. And I really want to say thank you to Alison McDougall that connected me with you, and a shout out to her. I'll tag her in this episode. Maybe she'll love to see both of us talking, and we'll see where I don't know what she's doing right now. We'll see where that goes. But where do you see yourself, like, in the short term? I mean, I can't ask anybody for the long term. The long term now, it's like 6 months. That's a long term. So where do you see yourself?
I mean, like leaning all the way in and just hiring team members to help and really just like do this whole thing. So I
That's
mean,
what you're focused on right now, right?
What's that?
That's what you're focused on right now, is that continue developing this and moving it forward to the next level, right?
Yeah. Yes. Next year, I want to write another book. I want to take the whole month of July off. I also want to take off between Thanksgiving and the end of the year. And because that's how people buy. People don't buy. Like people don't buy in July because everyone's on vacation, and they don't buy, end of years. We're all on vacation. So really trying to figure out for me how to live the most fulfilled life, serve the most number of people, right? And maintain that really healthy balance between work and life. I've got very young kids for being so old. So I have my first kid is going into kindergarten. And I always would dream when I was a W-2 employee, like, what would that look like? Because obviously there's a lot of content out there now about working parents and just truly how hard it is, and could I take off at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when they're out of school? And what does that look like? So I know you said, what's your short-term goal, but like midterm, long-term goal is really to keep blocking time on the typical Monday through Friday calendar while continuing to serve more people and live an extremely fulfilled life.
Kudos to you. Raising a family nowadays is not easy. On working parents, we're not in the 50s or the 30s anymore, where one individual worked and the rest of the family took care of the other parts of the family. This is a different world now, and kudos to you. Hats off. I've got a lot of respect. I don't have kids of my own, but I've got a lot of respect for people who do that. Who's got a family, they're raising them, they have a career, they're maintaining their career. It's not easy, and I know some people make it look easy because they're good at what they do. It's like when a mechanic is very good at changing your water pump in the engine. Oh, I can do that, but you try to change the water pump in the engine, there's no way you're going to be able to do that. But thank you again for your contribution to the industry. So moving along now to the industry itself. So now that you've worked in the industry for many years, you are helping the industry as a consultant. If I ask you a broad question regarding what's your views on the industry today, and how do you feel about the industry?
Yeah, that's a great loaded question.
You want to go more specific than that, so I'll leave it to you.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could take that a million different ways. So, in the course of my career, I learned how to be a machine translation subject matter expert. And selling machine translation was a big joy of mine. In fact, I won a award for creating the innovation framework, which was used to introduce concepts like machine translation, but and we could do a whole nother session on it. You could introduce anything to a client, especially a sophisticated client, and use the framework to drive toward a common goal of figuring out if this vendor could partner with this client to serve them how they want. So I think, especially now with AI, right? I mean, it's not just machine translation anymore. Now it's ChatGPT and all the other AIs and everything. I'm very much on the side of the fence where people argue, listen, I came in, that my role was delayed joining SDL. I first heard about it whenever 6 months later I got hired. And my boss told me it's because SDL had just acquired Trados, and like the SEC was like, investigating it. So like Trados coming really large into the scene, and obviously translation memory, and this whole concept was that in and of itself going to replace the translators, right? And now, like, how is AI going to impact the supply chain? I'm very much on the side of the fence that just like MT and all of the other AI now, it's aiding in the translators being able to get back to the core of what they really love to do, which is subjectively like transcreate, and we just have more and more content these days, right? The other thing that I'm a subject matter expert in is e-learning, which is also really kind of ironic with where the industry has to go, and voice AI, which would be considered like MT, right? So like voice AI and MTing your e-learning content, because people don't have attention spans anymore to watch a 1 hour webinar. And you've got more and more training you need to do, especially now that all employees are working from home, right? Compliance trainings, the ethics trainings, but just like training. And like, how are companies, the clients, spending their time, money, and effort on creating these trainings? And then how much are they spending to ask their vendor partners to translate the trainings, right? And so I see the industry embracing all of this AI and figuring out how to offer more creatively without losing profitability, hopefully, in fact, by gaining profitability, right? On how to implement ideas and concepts while leaning in to all of the new technologies. So it's kind of a long-winded answer to say, I think it's embracing the AI and the MT, and I think it's leveraging it to our best vendors as the best of our abilities. And I think it's really looking at like huge content, because like back in the day, 2010, 2008, companies were creating software and they had like huge manuals, documentation requirements to translate. And if you got in first with that client, that's where you'd see a huge chunk of change, because the documentation was so heavy that the vendors would make a lot of money translating that for these clients. But while you still see it a little, you don't see it a lot. So like, what are you seeing? You're seeing MT and AI, and like, how do you lean into that, right? And how do you just get ahead of the curve and use something like the innovation framework to push your ideas and your subject matter expertise to the client and buy them into this process downstream so that you can win more business and, see higher profits.
Right. So, and, I completely agree with you that leaning in onto the new and try to make sense of it, and in terms of developing services surrounding those technologies and offering them to your customers. I guess from my perspective, that's very important for the survival of some of those companies and the industry in general. The other thing too is, I'm not sure what your comments are on this. It's just the industry in general. Like, I just felt this for many years, that we are a sub-industry in a bigger knowledge base industry. And we sort of, over the years, and not to it's okay to do some self-criticism on our industry, or self-assessment on our industry, not criticism, just the way it is. We sort of built walls around the industry, and it stems from the translators themselves, being that, translators are specialized in translation. That's the industry is trying to come out of that, but the translator is still the core fundamental of our industry. So being in a knowledge-based economy, and you're a tiny piece of that knowledge-based economy, and just, if people can relate to what I'm saying right now, as an example, for instance, a company launches a project, they want to do, let's say, a mega website or medium-sized website, cost them, they have to hire the marketing agency, they have to hire the design agency, the content writing agency. That project would cost millions of dollars to put together. Now, toward the end, somebody says, oh, you know what, we need to translate this. So let's send it to the translation agency. The translation agency makes $30,000, $40,000 translating a website. So the purse size of this, it's very tiny for the language industry from the aspect of how much this organization have paid on developing a website. Again, the knowledge-based industry, it's massive industry, and the localization industry in general, the L10 industry, is really focused on a sliver of that. And this is where, the discussion and the service offering needs to expand on the technology side of things, offer more technologies to sustain what you currently have, but broaden the horizon as well to offer other types of services related to knowledge base that you could probably integrate directly into the business. People are going to say, well, that doesn't fit my business. You're in the knowledge base industry. You hire specialists to do the work. You can hire other specialists to do the work.
Yeah. I think it's really fun. I'm like sitting here. Yes, you are obviously right. Like, we are one small piece of this very large ecosystem, and there is millions of dollars changing hands when a company is buying a CMS, buying like technologies and like implementing all these processes. So yeah, it really will be a fun, like the last 20 years has been super exciting and very rewarding for, somebody who predominantly worked on the sales side of the industry, minus the NetApp stint, right? So like, it'll be really exciting to see what happens in the next 20 years and how, like you say, we continue to evolve and embrace and adapt all the new things coming our way.
My last, and before we close it off, I'd like to ask you one question. Hopefully I don't put you on the spot, but what is your best sales story?
Oh man, why can I only think of my worst sales story right now?
Whatever comes to mind and whatever you're comfortable with.
Well, I have so many sales stories, but really in my last role, because I think it's more top of mind. So within the last 4 years, I came in as an account manager, which was something that was a really hard job for me to get, because in the industry, sales took a split about 10 years ago, where at Lionbridge, we, before we acquired you guys anyway, like we kept what we hunted. So we hunted and we account managed all of our accounts, right? So I have so many great stories from there of just like winning accounts and getting to manage them for the length of the 6 years that I was there, right? I have so many good. So another good story, and I didn't even tell the original one. So there's two good stories. Let me tell them real quick. So one was Exact Target. They got acquired by Salesforce.com. And I really, I called on the Midwest software, and I really wanted to work with them. And the director of documentation was like, you're not a vendor. And so I figured out by calling around the organization and by reading online, that they were getting ready to go global. And so I called their counsel, their legal department, and it just so happened they had contracts that they needed to translate. And that was not something that Lionbridge typically wanted, like ad hoc, piecemeal, transactional jobs. But I convinced the counsel within Exact to sign an MSA, because he's the guy looking at the MSAs anyway, right? Like, yeah. He's like, yeah, sure, we'll sign the MSA. Like, yeah, sure. Oh my gosh. So I leveraged that MSA to go back to the head of documentation to be like, well, now we're a vendor and we're working with you and we have an MSA. And so she invited us to her RFP and we won it. So that was like,
wow. This is big for an answer. It's just no for an answer. It doesn't exist.
Yeah. And then the original story that I was thinking of was within this role, right? I inherited an account, and the former account manager didn't know his way around MT. He just didn't. And that's where this innovation framework really started to come to light, because I inherited the account and the client is frustrated because all they've been doing is asking for MT, and they're obviously bombarded by other vendors left, right, and center, right? And this had been a client of theirs for like forever. And I was like, wait a second, we can do MT. And I took them down the process, using the framework step by step by step, to testing it, to analyzing the data, to retesting it, to looking at the results, to letting the client make the decision, which languages, which content groups. And that was then 2.5 years in the making. And it's a successful, thriving program. And it was really from inheriting a client that was very unhappy to turning him into my first ever real executive sponsor. And all of the other main stakeholders that worked there were champions and supporters. It was very, very rewarding.
Congratulations. Excellent 2 stories. I really appreciate you sharing this with me and the audience. Kristin, I'm not surprised with all your successes. Having worked with you before, you could tell when an individual is ready and willing to do bigger and better things in their lives. And you've demonstrated this over and over again. So to all of our audience, again, if you do not have a sales infrastructure in place, I highly encourage you to look into building a sales infrastructure for yourselves. It'd be very good and excellent and sometimes savior of an addition to your organization as the industry continue going through the transformation that we're going through right now. And trust me when I say that, with all due respect to your project managers, they are not your sales team. Your sales team is a sales professional. There is a big distinction and big difference between your project managers doing the sale and a sales professional doing the sale. So if you are in doubt, if you have questions, if you have, you want to have a conversation, please reach out to Kristin. You can look her up on LinkedIn. And start the conversation. This conversation here, this channel is about opening the dialogues, possibilities in our industry. It is not sponsored by anybody. It's my own personal initiative. And I felt like we should do this. I should do this. Somebody should do this. And not that I need another responsibility, to be honest with you, but here you go. We're taking this on, and the goal of that industry, the channel here, is to continue fostering conversations to open up the industries to possibilities, to success for the 19,000 entrepreneurs in the industry, regardless of their location, regardless of where they are geographically. Kristin, I want to thank you for being with me on this channel today and for parting comments. Any before we close it off, anything you'd like to add to what has been said today?
Well, thank you so much for taking the initiative and putting together this channel and this resource, because I really think it's an amazing thing for our industry, right? And yeah, anybody can reach out to me on LinkedIn or hello@beabettersalesleader.com. And I'd be honored to have a dialogue to see where they are today and if I could support them.
Well, I hope you get something out of this conversation. I'm sure you will. Others have done marvelous things resulting in this conversation. They got opportunities, they got leads out of it. I hope this opens the door for possibilities for you. Kristin, thanks so much. Great seeing you after all these years. Don't be a stranger for this channel. Mi casa es su casa. This channel is yours. Anytime you have an announcement to make or you want to have a conversation with the broader audience, you're welcome back anytime you need, anytime you feel like, now I need to get the message out. Please consider us or consider this channel your channel anytime you like. For the audience, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your listening to this podcast and viewing this YouTube video. Much appreciated. If you like what we do here, please subscribe. Consider subscribing. It doesn't cost you much, just a click of a button. Subscribe to this channel and comment and like our videos. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much again, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.